Hello friends. In January of this year, Panasonic announced the LUMIX S5II mirrorless camera. I was super excited. I had used the camera, but you didn't see a video from me about it on launch day because I had been in bed awaiting back surgery for months. Fortunately, it was a highly covered release, both by major media brands and YouTubers and through plenty of other outlets. But now Raymond and I are ready to talk about it. Okay, now let me tell you a secret. I had used the camera prior to Panasonic's announcement, right? Before anyone could talk about this camera, in the fall of 2022, I was a beta tester. It was a very pre-production unit and it performed nearly as well as a production camera. So I knew that really good things were coming when this body came to market. When Raymond and I discuss gear, our style is to try to get as much field time as possible, which means not always releasing a video on day one of the camera's release. And we've turned down plenty of gear offers because we simply didn't have time to do it justice. In this case, after I made time to beta test the camera and we received this kit just prior to Panasonic's announcement, with my pending back surgery and Raymond taking care of our family, we've taken our time. I have experience with the camera from beta testing and now with taking this camera body out into the field, and Raymond has used this on and off for months. So we can and will both talk about this camera from experience in different situations and with different lenses and different brands of lenses. Not from a purely specification standpoint, but from an overall use and a who might like this perspective. Plus, we'll share photos and videos captured with the camera throughout this video so you can see what the camera's output looks like. You'll see the lens used at the bottom of the screen like this. Now, we do own this guy's predecessor, the Panasonic S5. Raymond will talk more about why in a moment. We were drooling over the specs of this upgrade from day one. In fact, one important specification dominates all others for the updated S5. Finally, on-sensor phase detection autofocus has come to the Panasonic S-series L-mount cameras in the S5II. We love the L-mount. The first L-mount camera that we used was the Leica SL. The first we purchased was the Leica SL2, and along the way we've used a few others, the Panasonic S5, the Leica FP and FPL, the Leica CL. Did I miss anything from our history with the L-mount, Raymond?
You did. It's the lenses. Hooked on our SL2, we quickly but methodically began growing our L-mount lens collection, and we're also not shy about adapting other brands of lenses to the L-mount. There's no substitute for the Leica look. It's real, and so many L-mount lenses from the L-mount alliance of Sigma, Leica, and Panasonic complement the Leica L-mount cameras. However, and Leigh might feel differently about this, I personally am skittish about taking the Leica SL2 everywhere. It's a really expensive camera. It attracts attention, and if I do something foolish with it, it's notably expensive to replace.
I'm in the pool, some pictures will do is I'm gonna do. So make sure that you have some sort of.
Don't get me wrong, gear's for using, but seeing that the S5 was a less expensive but still mighty alternative using the L-mount, I was curious, and Leigh and I both have this problem. When we're curious about something, in this case, something that we had not ever used, sometimes we'll just go ahead and buy it. And this was one of those occasions. And it's a purchase that neither of us regret, fortunately. To be fair, Leigh has not used the S5 as much as our other cameras. In fact, on an L-mount outing, she's likely to use the Leica SL2 and me with the S5. So it's perfect. And we can trade lenses back and forth as much as we want because they're both L-mount. Even if it's a Panasonic, Sigma, or Leica lens, we can hand it back and forth. That's the beauty of the L-mount alliance for both the cameras and the lenses alike. One thing different about that S5 and the Leica SL2 compared to the Nikon bodies back over here and the Sony body that we used to have and many other bodies that we've borrowed is the autofocus on the S5. Without getting too technical, the S5 relies on Panasonic's trusty depth from defocus system, which does require the focus to subtly wobble in and out, both in still photography and in videography when you're continuously focusing. It can be a little weird when you're taking pictures, and it can be noticeable in video footage, particularly in the background. It still focuses very well, but it's something that always had to be brought up in conversation when comparing Panasonic and many other L-mount cameras to their competitors.
The L-mount bodies work very well, but they simply don't have the virtually predictive autofocus of those other brands.
In fact, it kept L-mount, despite the extensive lens and body system, in a bit of a niche, or even a niche.
So many people, when I'm on trail, will know Nikon or Canon or sometimes Sony if I'm carrying those, but if it's anything else, they just say, "What kind of camera is that?" I agree with Raymond's points, except not taking the Leica SL2 everywhere. In my experience, every camera attracts attention, and I've taken the SL2 on all kinds of rock scrambling hikes. The thing is built like a tank. Anyway, I love our L-mount cameras, particularly that SL2, but when circumstances have called for wildlife or fast action photography, I would usually grab our tried and true Nikon bodies with their mature on-sensor phase detection autofocus. And then most of our day-to-day photography would be some mix of Leica, Panasonic, Nikon, Fujifilm, whatever else we had in the studio. So sometimes the L-mount gear would take a backseat. From the beta testing of the S5II, where I did some side-by-side comparisons in the field with our S5, and from my recent use of the production camera, I can now say that it is a big step forward for the LUMIX cameras, at least in terms of autofocus, especially autofocus in challenging situations like this one. Taking a look at these photos of a backlit hummingbird in flight, the S5II detected it and focused in time for me to capture the photo, but the S5 did not. I was lucky that this little cutie stuck around flitting amongst these leaves for long enough that I could scramble to swap the big telephoto lens between the two cameras. I should also mention here that LUMIX's autofocus algorithm was completely redesigned for the S5II as well. In general, it performs exactly as I would expect from a current generation phase detection focusing camera, whether it was from Nikon, Canon, Sony, or Fujifilm. Yeah, every brand has its autofocus strengths and weaknesses, but L-mount is out of the corner now and immediately even further into the conversation with all of the household names. Again, it was always in the conversation for us and for a lot of gear-loving photographers, but it was hard to talk about it without having to mention the focusing engine. As Raymond mentioned, one strength of L-mount is the 3 brands that contribute to the L-mount alliance. In our use of this camera, we've used lenses from Panasonic, including their very capable 20 to 60 millimeter kit lens, lenses from Leica, like this 24 to 90. We borrowed several lenses from Sigma, the 35 millimeter f1.2 Art, that's one of my dream lenses. I'd love to own it. The 105 millimeter macro, and the new 60 to 600 super duper telephoto zoom. I realize that's not the technical term, but it tells the story. And we've used our own wonderful lightweight Sigma contemporary lenses on it, and we adapted M-mount lenses to it. And mirrorless brings so many options. Nikon shooters can even adapt a legacy of f-mount lenses to this and other L-mount cameras too. In short, between my beta testing and this more recent testing, we got a bit carried away using this camera with so many different lenses, but that's what we do.
We do want to be clear. There's a series of other updates for the S5II besides the phase detection autofocus. It is still a 24 megapixel camera. It's in virtually the same body, but there are cooling vents on the new body and cooling fans inside. The cooling combined with the firmware allows unlimited video in most of the video modes. It has open gate 6K video. Stills with the electronic shutter can be captured at 30 frames per second with continuous autofocus and raw images. Oh, and both SD card slots are UHS 2. This camera is a beast in a very small but livable package. There's not a camera back here that it could not go up against from a specification standpoint. And again, there's no longer that asterisk that needs to be brought up when discussing the focus system.
I agree that this can go up against most other cameras out there in a general sense. I mean, we have the Nikon Z30, which is smaller and maybe easier for vlogging than the S5II. We have the Nikon Z9, which is a real fast action champ. But the Z30 is APS-C, which some folks might find unattractive. It also doesn't have a viewfinder, which can be challenging. And the Z9 is a big and heavy body with a big and heavy price tag. You can't compare cameras simply by choosing one or two specifications or features. What Raymond and I have talked about again and again while discussing this camera is that it is such an incredible all-around option with a deep catalog of lenses available to use with it. And I suppose that was my conclusion with this camera. If you are looking for a camera body and you aren't loyal to a different system and you want something that will allow you to photograph a wide variety of situations, this should be one of the options you consider. Okay, what about you, Raymond? Give us your quick hit conclusion.
The real key with this camera, oh no. I don't know which one this is. Is this the S5 or the S5II?
I think I have the S5II.
See, wait, hold on.
We have the vents.
Check the bottom.
For the vents.
The
This one
vents?
has the vents.
You have the vents?
Yeah,
okay.
here.
See, yep,
take
yep, yep. This S5II could wear a Nikon or Sony badge without apology. I'm glad it doesn't, because I'm glad it's L mount. With the original S5, if that wore a Nikon or Sony badge, people would say, why would I want a Sony or Nikon only with contrast detection, autofocus? Now Panasonic can play against any brand without compromise or apology.
Well said. The S5II is a great camera, and for many people, it should bring L mount into the conversation. Like I said earlier, the S5 can be relied on as well. I know we're talking about the S5II being so great, but don't misunderstand. We own the S5. We obviously think it's a good camera body. And with the S5II priced at $2,000 and the S5 in wonderful condition, pre-owned at KEH for under $1,500, either is a great choice and a great value, with the S5II being that much more capable with the on-sensor phase detection and being a 10-bit in-camera video monster. But truly, the most important thing about the S5II is that I can reach for it without compromise for almost any day out with my camera. There's no voice in the back of my head saying, "You'd better bring the Nikon Z7." I mean, I'm going to certainly bring my Nikon bodies out, but as a matter of preference and mixing things up, not because of any limitation of the S5II. And that wraps it up for us today, but I wonder what you think. Raymond and I said that the S5II brings Panasonic and the L mount into the conversation for more people. Do you agree? Does it entice you? Or have you been considering Panasonic L mount all along? I'll be curious to see your comments and conversations. If you aren't subscribed, make sure you do. We have all sorts of projects coming up. Plus, it helps the channel tremendously. And give this video a like if you've gotten this far. Thank you to Panasonic for sending the S5II. Thank you to Sigma for loaning us a few lenses. And thank you for watching.